Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. For the better part of a year, an intense debate has raged at the very upper echelons of the Catholic Church among its cardinals. Last February, Cardinal Walter Kasper, a progressive German bishop, unveiled a proposal that has dominated the conversation surrounding the Synod on the Family in Rome. The Pope has said he wants a robust debate, and some cardinals have delivered. Cardinal Kasper has been on an international tour promoting his ideas for relaxing the annulment process, and now a new book, Remaining in the Truth of Christ, is rebutting him. The book includes contributions from 5 cardinals, among them Cardinal Raymond Burke, the head of the Apostolic Signatura, the Vatican's Supreme Court. I sat down with Cardinal Burke in Rome to discuss the implications of the Kasper proposal, streamlining the annulment process, and the Synod on the Family, which got underway this week. Here's my very candid interview with Cardinal Raymond Burke at his residence in Rome. I want to start with the Pope praising Cardinal Walter Kasper. This was back in February when the Cardinal issued his proposal in the form of an introductory statement to the Synod that's just beginning here. The Pope said this was profound theology, theology done on one's knees. Given that kind of papal endorsement, was there any hesitancy to critique what Cardinal Kasper was saying and to now become part of a book with a number of other cardinals rebutting most of his argument?
I have to say that, thank God, no, that a number of the cardinals spoke very immediately and very clearly, because the presentation of Cardinal Kasper was such that it demanded a strong response. Otherwise, to give the impression that what he said was acceptable would have been heading us down in a direction contrary to our Lord's own teaching, his very words in the gospel. And so perhaps on the part of some, but I know that a number of cardinals intervened immediately in the matter, in some sense have spoken very clearly on the subject. I think of someone like Cardinal Carlo Caffarra of Bologna, who is a world-class moral theologian and a wonderful archbishop, and he's spoken very clearly about this, given interviews and so forth. And
there seems to be a consensus emerging. You've got Cardinal Pell and Cardinal Mueller, certainly no slouch over the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, yourself, and Cardinal Scola. Many others have joined their voices to this chorus. Who in the college are supportive of Cardinal Kasper's position at this point? Aside from Cardinal Kasper and a few members of the media, I don't see a wide group of cardinals or bishops coming to the defense here.
I really don't either. I'm not good at predicting these things, but I think the media has certainly taken it up as a kind of cause, and really for now this has been going on for 9 months, and the Cardinal Kasper has been going around giving talks in the United States and other places, and continues to write, to give interviews, and the media have really promoted this. But I saw one news item from Germany where Cardinal Marx apparently said that the German bishops were all supporting him. First of all, I didn't verify whether the report itself was accurate, but I don't believe that. I know some very good bishops in Germany who I can't imagine are supportive of this approach that he's making.
Cardinal Kasper has been very direct in saying what you are a part of, you and these other cardinals, is nothing more than a political act, and that this is, quote, not the way we're to do things in the church. This is the way you do them in politics. He's stunned at the organized effort. Your response?
Well, we are servants of the truth. This is not any kind of political act at all. If you read the book is not polemical. No. The book doesn't promote some particular agenda. The book is at the service of the truth about marriage. I didn't choose the title, but it's a brilliant title taken from Familiaris Consortio, Remaining in the Truth of Christ. And that's what we we're trying to underline. And so when Cardinal Kasper gave his presentation and asked for a dialogue about this, asked for a response, some of us got together and we prepared a response. But it's a very scholarly presentation. You will see it. You can read all of the articles that cover the whole aspect of church teaching and discipline on marriage. It's very serene, but it's very carefully focused on the truth of the Catholic teaching as it has been always the Church's teaching. This isn't something that's recent, and it's presented in that way. So I don't understand how the Cardinal can make those kind of accusations that this was politics, this was a plot, nothing of the sort. In fact, it was very hard work for all of us to get together, and we wanted to offer it to the Holy Father and to the Synod in time, and so we had to, the consistory was toward the end of February, and we had to get to work and get this put together.
Now, will you be making sure that this gets into the hands of your brother bishops and cardinals and the fathers of the Synod?
Surely I will, and I'm sure others will be doing the same. But no, we want every member of the Synod. They simply should have this book in order to enjoy the results of the research which the authors have done and into the Church's teaching and discipline.
Yeah. I want to cover some of the major points that you touch on in your presentation, but that are covered in the book because they address different aspects of this question: what to do with remarried Catholics who are divorced and wish to enter into communion again. The Pope himself seemed to float the possibility of the Orthodox solution. And he put it this way: after a period of penance, he said, they give a second chance. They allow it. Your thoughts on that? And if that is a licit and valid way, historically speaking, and in the Catholic setting, to proceed?
I think the clear approach is this. We begin with the words of our Lord when the Pharisees trying to trick him asked him about Moses permitting divorce. And our Lord responded very clearly, it was not so from the beginning. In other words, he underlines that the indissolubility of marriage is part of the natural moral law. And then he teaches very clearly, he said, the man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. And this teaching had to be very clear because the disciples themselves said to him, well, Lord, if it's that way, it's better not to marry. And then he reminds them that God gives the grace to those who are called to the married state. So if I am married to someone, it's not possible for me to be married to someone else because that marriage is indissoluble, it's for life. And so to say, to give another chance, what does that mean? It has no meaning. As long as I remain married to that person, that it hasn't been shown that the marriage, in fact, although it was entered in good faith, was null because one or the other parties withheld an essential part of the content of marriage consent, or one of the other parties was bound by a prior union or something like that. Then I'm called for my lifetime to be faithful to that marriage. And so they talk about second chances. And the Orthodox, it's very interesting, but I haven't heard a single Orthodox leader praise Cardinal Kasper's intervention and saying, well, isn't it wonderful that you Roman Catholics now have seen the wisdom of our approach? Because it isn't what it's being presented to be. And it's not clear. They don't talk about it as a real marriage. They talk about it as a penitential marriage, as some kind of an accommodation. But it's clear also, it seems to me, that they understand that they're in some way they're not doing what the Lord has commanded us.
Well, and the Archbishop in the book runs through the history, fascinating history.
Excellent.
And he points out that in the 9th century, there was sort of a liberalized form of allowing remarriage, but it was under duress and pressure from an emperor.
Exactly.
A Byzantine emperor at the time.
No, the whole thing can be traced to this, what they call Caesaropapism. In other words, the undue influence of the emperors on the patriarchs.
Now, I can almost hear, when you were reciting there a moment ago, Jesus' response to the Pharisees, I can almost hear Cardinal Kasper, whom in an America magazine interview recently said, and I quote, "We cannot simply take one phrase of the gospel of Jesus and from that deduce everything. Discipline can change." So I think we have here a theological fundamentalism that is not Catholic. You would respond how?
Well, if we don't take seriously every word of our Lord, I don't know who we are anymore. We're certainly not the church. We're not his mystical body. And secondly, to try to drive a wedge between discipline and doctrinal truth is simply false in the Catholic Church, because every discipline is at the service of a teaching or some sacred reality to safeguard it and to promote it. And that's why the Church has the discipline that she has. If it's being fundamentalist to hold strictly to the teaching on marriage, well, then I'm happy to be a fundamentalist.
I want to talk about something else Cardinal Kasper has raised. He says he is projecting and proposing a merciful process, described thusly, and I quote, "Divorced and remarried people should find a good priest who accompanies them for some time, and if this second civil marriage is solid, then the path of new orientation can end with a confession and absolution." What's wrong with that path of mercy?
What's wrong with the path of mercy is that it doesn't respect the truth. I've accompanied couples who are in an irregular union, tried to help them in the sense that some are in unions where they can't easily leave the union because of children or whatever. Tried to help them to lead a chaste life, to, in as much as possible, respect the truth of a prior marriage. And that's the ultimate goal. But how can now suddenly accompanying them in that way justify telling them a lie about the fact that they're bound to another marriage?
Yeah, he's basically saying if you have a confession and an absolution, you should be allowed back into communion. Well, that's nice for the individual. What does it say about the first marriage? And, and what is the state of the second marriage, which even he says is intolerable? It's intolerable, but it's something we have to accommodate.
Yes, in this whole discussion, I've often thought we ought to at least get back to the principle of non-contradiction. In other words, something cannot be true and not true at the same time. In other words, it's either marriage or it isn't. But you raise a very good point, which many people don't consider. In his conversation, his whole concern is directed toward one party who's now in an irregular union. Yeah. But that party is bound to another spouse.
And children.
And children, possibly. A whole series of relationships with the marriage. I shouldn't call it the first marriage because it is the marriage. And now suddenly to say, well, no, this person can enter a new union, is to say to the wife or the husband, whichever it may be, to possible children and to others who knew them in marriage, that the Church really doesn't respect the indissolubility of marriage. That yes, we teach that, but then on occasion when we act contrary to it. Well, that's simply unacceptable, and it's not good for the person himself or herself who we think we're trying to help by giving them a way out or a second chance, whatever you want to call it, of their situation, because the way to their salvation is to try to live as justly as they can in the sad, the tragic situation of a regular union. And secondly, it's certainly an injustice to the spouse of the person, to children, and to others for whom their married relationship was very important. People don't think about that. We hear this all the time at the Apostolic Signatura, sometimes when there are tribunals who are abusive and giving easy declarations of nullity. And we hear from the other parties and from their children, how can this be? That we were happily married for 20 years and had 4 or 5 children, and then suddenly he got taken up, my husband got taken up with some pretty young woman who expressed an interest in him, and he went off with her and abandoned us. And now the church
is affirming that?
Exactly.
This annulment question, the process of, as you say, declaration of nullity, which is the official term, not an annulment.
Because we're not canceling something that exists. And to annul has 2 senses. You can have the sense that there is something there and you're just wiping it out. You're annulling it. Or it can mean that you're declaring null. So the strict term is to declare null in the sense that we study based on an objective documentation. We study a marriage, and if it's demonstrated that in fact the marriage was null, then we declare it so.
Right.
But we didn't make the marriage null. The marriage was null, and we simply are declaring it. And that in itself is not an easy reality for people to face, but they understand it then.
Now, Cardinal Kasper has called this nothing more than a canonical construction. He says that it's a Catholic way of divorce in a Catholic way and a dishonest way.
That's really offensive because this is a process which has developed along the centuries to respect the truth about marriage. It's a process that's very carefully articulated. If you wanted to read a really beautiful appreciation of the marriage nullity process, in 1944, Pope Pius XII gave a talk to the Roman Rota, the Tribunal of the Roman Rota, in which he sets forth the beauty of the nullity process in the way it gets to the truth about the claim that a marriage is null, so that the parties can really be in peace, and that the declaration of nullity serves their good and is not in any sense a kind of Catholic divorce. But the Cardinal makes this statement. He said, well, these aspects of the nullity process are not of divine law. Of course they're not. But it is of divine law that the Church has to have a process, a means of verifying objectively and with moral certitude a claim of nullity.
And protecting the justice for both parties.
That's of divine law. And the Church, people are now talking about some kind of an administrative process, or that people just go and visit their parish priest and he'd assess the situation. That's not adequate. And what priest would want to take that kind of responsibility himself? No good priest would.
No, this is a difficult process. I mean, on one level it is. On another level, it's been done so often and for so long. The Church is very adept at using it. But the complexity of this annulment process, the interview of witnesses, you can contest it. The second confirmation, which is something I'd never heard of before.
Well, which is very important in order to keep a check on the process, and also a consolation to those judges in first instance. They know that they do their best, they make a judgment, but they have the consolation knowing it's going to be reviewed on a second level, so that if any way they miss something, it will be caught and corrected.
And so the fast pass to an annulment would be a very bad idea.
That is iniquitous, because it presents itself as some kind of good or nice thing for people. And it may be true, it may not be true, but you don't, when you come to marriage, you don't fool around with maybe. You have to arrive as best you can at the truth of the situation and make a judgment. And the process is as complex as are the situations that lead to a marriage breaking up.
Now, the Synod was to consider the whole annulment process. This was part of the discussion. I imagine it will still be part of the discussion. Will you, as head of the Signatura, be part of that aspect of the conversation in the Synod? Yes,
we all have the opportunity to speak for 4 minutes or 5 minutes. I'm not sure how long it will be. And then we also take part in the discussion groups. And obviously my duty, I'm a member of the Synod as the prefect of the Supreme Tribunal, and my duty will be to point to the truth about the marriage nullity process. If I may say one more thing about that, We study in the Signatura since 1968 has had this, the supervision of tribunals. We study all of these situations, and our conclusion is the difficulty is not the process. With the process, it's with lack of people who are prepared to carry it out properly. Mm-hmm. And so if the bishops prepare properly, canon lawyers, canonists, both priests and laity, to carry out the process, there won't be a difficulty. And we know tribunals that work very effectively.
Are you at all disappointed in that this synod and the church fathers were to consider this en masse? The Pope has called for this open dialogue with everyone over these issues of family, particularly the annulment process. Yet, before the synod, in August, the Pope convened a group of experts, a commission of his own design, and they're already charged with making recommendations to reform the annulment process. Hasn't the train already left the station before the synod's begun?
Well, I can't really explain that. It is rather surprising to say the least. I wasn't part of the decision to form this commission, but it would have seemed to me that the synod could have come to the conclusion, well, we need to look at the marriage nullity process. But this seems to be prejudicial in the sense to say, well, we already know that it has to be revised. Mm-hmm. That to me is not a given. I don't see that.
Do you see any reform that's needed in the annulment process? If you were on that commission, would there be recommendations you would make?
I would. If there were, they would be very few and very small. My recommendation is let's find a way to prepare people well to serve in the tribunals and the matrimonial tribunals. And the process, we just had the Dignitas Connubii, the instruction on and this was a product of over 2 years of study. The Code of Canon Law, the 1983 Code of Canon Law, reviewed the whole process for the declaration of nullity of marriage. We need to implement these documents and not this legislation that we have, and not be going off trying now to come up with some form of process or no process at all, which won't be true to the Church's long experience or tradition in handling these situations.
Let's look for a moment at the Synod itself. There's a lot of confusion about what this is. Most of this is playing out on the front pages of the papers of the world and in news broadcasts, and that's frankly a very bad conveyor of this kind of complexity, history, and doctrine. Talk to me about the nature of this Synod, and are you concerned that some are viewing this, Cardinal Kasper has been very frank about this, that this is sort of a renewal of Vatican II. It's like a reopening of the Second Vatican Council, in that these issues that were once taboo, or indeed were to be no longer discussed under the previous two popes, we're now opening once more. Does that concern you and the way it's playing out in the media?
Oh, absolutely. I've used the term that the Synod has been hijacked by the media, but we have to take in the Church a good deal of responsibility for letting that happen and not getting out the clear message with regard to the Synod. Mm-hmm. But let me put it this way. Here we are touching upon something that Pope Benedict XVI explained in a really wonderful way in 2005 in his Christmas address to the Roman Curia, the College of Cardinals, and the Governorate of Vatican City State, which he talked about. It was the anniversary of the close of the council, and he talked about the two kinds of interpretation of the council documents. One, the what he called the hermeneutic, or the interpretive key of rupture and discontinuity, which is inherently contrary to the nature of the Church, because the Church is an organic reality handed. The life of the Church comes to us from the apostles in an unbroken line. The other hermeneutic, the one that is authentic and true, is the hermeneutic of reform in continuity. And so we cannot have at this Synod a reopening of questions which have been discussed and to which the Church has responded in an authoritative way. We can certainly hold up those teachings again But the idea that, for instance, and I trust this wouldn't be the case, but the question of contraception, that would be discussed again as if there were no encyclical Letter Humanae Vitae, which set forth the Church's unchanging teaching in the matter, or in the whole area of human sexuality, the question of things that are intrinsically evil, like sexual relations between people of the same sex and so forth. I mean, I trust that these questions will not come up.
Well, but you hear voices suggesting they might come up. Now you're hearing that perhaps contraception in the bond of marriage, that could be acceptable. We're hearing from Cardinal Kasper again, questions of same-sex unions, rainbow families, step families. Should these be part of the Synod discussions?
No, what should be part of the Synod discussion is the family as God created it from the beginning. And if the Synod can attend to that teaching, then it will provide for people who are in all these other kind of situations which are not right, will receive the help that they need. But we can't talk about, for instance, if people are two people of the same sex are living as if they're husband and wife. This is something which is always and everywhere wrong. This is intrinsically evil. We can't suggest that somehow we can incorporate that into our understanding of the family. And so we have to present to those who find themselves in these situations the truth about marriage, which is a call to conversion. I don't know what rainbow family means.
Final question. You have been on the headlines here for many, many weeks. It is often reported that in removing you or not accepting your position on the Congregation for Bishops, that the Pope was somehow disciplining you or trying to publicly say, look, I've removed him from this as a punitive action. Is that how you view it? And do you see, did you interpret it that way for your outspokenness on this, Canon 915 and other matters?
No one has a right to be on these congregations. The Pope freely appoints. And so I was surprised to be taken off the congregation in the sense that I believed that I was working effectively there and certainly trying to serve. But I accepted it. The Holy Father never said anything to me about it, that one way or another, that he was trying to show his displeasure with me or whatever. So I don't know. I can't respond to it other way than to say I just simply have accepted it and have gone on with...
Continued your work.
Exactly, do what I have plenty to do, and I tried to keep at it. And obviously the appointment of bishops is one of the most serious responsibilities in the Church. It was a weighty one, and I just pray for that process because the Catholic Church, by its very nature, depends on worthy shepherds.
Your recommendations to those who are looking in on this process, watching the Synod, what would your advice be to them? What do you hope they take away from this whole quasi-public discussion of family and the issues attendant to it?
What I'm hoping is that the Church is really rich and beautiful magisterium with regard to marriage and the family will be brought to light again and held up. I think, for instance, of the encyclical Casti Connubii of Pius XI. I think of Familiaris Consortio. I think of Humanae Vitae. There's just a whole body of wonderful teaching on marriage and the family, and so I really hope that the Synod will draw us all to go back and to plumb again the depths of that teaching.
Remaining in the Truth of Christ, including the chapter on the annulment process by Cardinal Burke, is available from Ignatius Press at bookstores everywhere and through the EWTN Religious Catalog.